welcome everyone to Season 7, Episode 2 of The Dining Table. So, let's kick off with our narrative alphas for the week. So, number one, we had Mim basically missing about a couple of $10 million because what happened when UST tanked, they had UST's collateral somewhere in the system and they had a bunch of bad debt. And with that bad debt, rather than trying to figure out how to repay it, they bought a bunch of Curve tokens, hoping to make back the losses, and then lost money on the Curve tokens. And then the founder leveraged, I think it was like Spell, the native governance token, and then got liquidated. And now they've just got this huge hole of money that is needs to be filled or probably will not be filled. And the key thing that was kind of running through my mind during this was that like prudent protocol management is extremely crucial. And I think during this bull run, everyone got ahead of themselves thinking that, oh, it's fine, you can just move some money around here and there and like should be sweet. But as we saw with UST, that didn't work out. But we've even seen a game once with Abracadabra. So that was, it's pretty crazy to think a stablecoin like irresponsibly manage their treasury like that. And just, I think, one of the many dominoes to fall. So kind of pause there, like, what do you guys think of that or anything that goes through your head?
Like, isn't it just a tale as old as time? Like, you hear it all the time in TradFi, in like DeFi and stuff like that. It's just people go, oh, there's a small little mistake I made, and now I'm going to just not tell anyone and try and recover it. And it's like, I don't know, honesty's the best policy. And I think, who was this? Like Optimism and Wintermute? Like, just the fact that like there was something that went wrong and we're just going to tell you it's painful as shit. But at least it's like, I've done it. I've got everything out there. Anything from here, everyone knows about. If you try and hide it, it just compounds. It gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, you can't hide on chain. That's the problem. So
can you hide? Yeah, exactly. That's the nice difference between what we hear, like with what's happening on Celsius, right? With all the other drama that's happening on chain with those protocols, it's like completely transparent. So we have the information. Whereas those TradFi, Celsius, and so on, it's very like shady in a sense. We don't know what these guys are doing, but we know that they're being degens in the background.
It's a professional banker by day, degen by night. And I think what's funny is people think that you have to, if you want capital efficiency, you have to kind of go centralized or kind of have trust in a bad way. And I think what's beautiful about like an on-chain credit score, we're using what's on-chain to build trust. I think there's some discussion in the general channel about like, can under-collateralized really work? And it's like, it can, but you need an environment where the information is public and transparent and everyone can actually tune into. And it's run by algorithms, not humans. That's the whole promise of DeFi and why we all came here, so we can have algorithms manage everything and remove us subjective monkeys out of the picture. So yeah, well, that was the first bit I had. The second one was really interesting. This is one of my favorite tweeters called ARCx Hams. Basically, it's talking about Curve and Convex and how Curve emissions people justify because they say, oh, it's a user-owned model. It's normal for crypto. This time it's different. It's like, no. Curve and Convex are issuing stock to pay a dividend, and they're basically bleeding all of this value. And when you run the numbers on, like, is this actually profitable or not? It's like, no, this is absolutely terrible. And we've kind of normalized such predatory practices in crypto of like, oh yeah, let's print our imaginary money to pay for real money in the hopes that by paying with fake money, we can generate real money. Like, that's basically what all of this comes down to. And what I love about ARCx Hams, he's just run the numbers to be like, no, you're categorically losing so much money by doing this. And if any of you have seen the emissions chart for Curve, it just bleeds value like crazy, and it's codified in the smart contracts for the next 4 to 5 years. So the reason why I found this relevant, and I guess like thinking about what we're doing at ARC, is like when you think about the unit economics of a protocol, you want to make sure that what you're doing is like logically sound. If the logic train that you run through says, we're going to give someone money, but the way we get this money is by creating some imaginary money or pretending like this thing holds true, you've got a broken model. The only way you should be giving back tokens or cash or whatever to token holders should be if you've created real value and you're genuinely profitable. And the way you stay profitable is by knowing your costs and knowing your revenue. And when you subtract the two, you get your profits, and your profits can then be redistributed to the relevant parties. If you don't have a model that respects that, you're basically playing like what I call a circular money game. So that was some initial thoughts on that, and we'd love to hear whatever anything else has. I think Hugh, like you and I love to jam about unit economics, so we'd love to hear your take on this.
When is Curve going to collapse?
Oh god,
that's a juicy take. That is such a juicy take.
I know, hot take.
Hot take. I don't know about collapse, but let's just say there's a lot of bleeding to go. If there's no one to buy the token, then the token will go down.
I think it's like, I'm trying to remember the project where this happened, but there was some project offering some yield. Like, I feel like I'm fucking inventing things at this point, but there was some project emitting some yield, and they just changed changed the yield by a few percent, and they were just bleeding customers. And it's just like a common theme you hear all the time. It's like, the moment the yield goes down just a little bit, and it's no longer like, I'm offering you 600% on your money kind of thing, just customers leave. And it's like, it's just a really interesting cycle at the moment, as it's like, we're going to give you all of this free money for you to hang around. Like, it's reminiscent of the ICO era of like, we're just going to give you all these tokens, we're going to give you freebies, and these freebies will worth something in the future. And it's just like, it gets to that point where everyone goes, this is kind of dumb, and it collapses, and ICOs aren't really a thing anymore. And I think this whole thing of like just giving away free money, is this yield thing, is like, it's just not sustainable in a lot of ways. Like, I like things like staked ETH because there's a real kind of thing behind it. So the yield is from the whole fact of you staking. So there's some I don't know, some like reasonableness with the yield. But then when you see someone like, a good example is Anchor, and a good example is like UST of like, we're going to give you 20%. It's like, where does that come from? And you see with Celsius and things like, where does this come from? This free money? And you could say, oh, it's a bribe to kind of get us started up, get us off the ground. But it's like, when does that stop? And it's like a poison pill, right? You always want, as soon as you start doing it, you always want to keep doing it. You never want to turn off that tap, because you're like, fuck, the moment we stop giving this money, people will leave, and it becomes this like negative spiral in a way.
The tricky thing is, sorry, Kevin. The tricky thing is that most people in crypto have like a very short attention span, and like the idea of like a value stock, right? Where you're getting, if you're investing in like a CPG company in like the Fortune 500, and you're getting paid like a dividend every quarter, like that is so boring to most people in crypto. And I think when most people play the game of capital, appreciation, so they want to see that the equity increase in value, and then they sort of realize the capital gains, as opposed to receiving a dividend every month or whatever. And I think that's going to get bled out by the fact that there's going to be a whole like wash of new people in the next cycle who will probably come from more of that like traditional institutional finance type background, where this is actually incredibly attractive. The idea of like tokenizing equity or tokenizing any kind of financial asset is like a true innovation for like most traditional finance people. And so like that, I see it's just like, perhaps like it's a bull market thing, where like the bull market people are just like, I just want to get 100x or 1,000 bagger or whatever. It's like, it doesn't really, it's definitely not sustainable because no business can actually do that profitably. So I think like maybe there's just a coming to terms of the reality of how these businesses operate and how much value they're actually creating, and that will like need to level set in terms of expectations before people can realistically value these businesses in terms of their FTV.
Yeah, I think the other bit here is like, oh, go for it, go.
I was gonna kind of just like almost derail a bit of this. It's going like, what's the alternative, right? Like, if we, people offer 40-50%, like to a point you said, which is like attention spans. Like, what is the alternative other than wait till those value investors really kind of fall in? Like, what is the alternative? Could you offer 3%? Yeah. Is anyone going to listen to that?
Well, I think really what it comes down to is like all of this just comes down to like cost to acquire a customer. And if it doesn't matter if you pay a lot of money to acquire a customer, you just want to make sure that they hang around and you can make more money from them in the long run. It's just is a tale as old as time. The problem with crypto right now, the cost to acquire a customer is so high. No one knows how much value they bring, and there's no incentive schemes that keep them around. It's just, you could offer a 100% APY, but the person would then have to stick around for 4 years. Like, that doesn't really exist. So I think it's more of an incentive problem than a like cost problem. But just in the order of time, let's quickly move through a bit. No, this is great. The other thing that I found interesting this week was Bancor. So they're an AMM and they offer impermanent loss protection, but it's a bit weird because impermanent loss isn't really real. It's just you lose out on the capital appreciation of an asset. So Bancor's way to protect you from losing that appreciation is by giving you Bancor tokens to cover the losses that they print from nowhere. But if you're printing tokens to cover losses and then people sell the tokens to cover the losses, you need even more tokens next time to cover the losses. So once again, like another circular money game that only has one direction, unfortunately. And then the other interesting bit was around Solend. So there's a $270 million whale on Solana borrowing on a protocol called Solend, and he's been inactive, the whale. So governance has put up a vote of what should we do with the $270 million, but there's one whale who dominated the vote with $700,000. So it's like a $700,000 whale of some obscure project deciding the fate of $270 million of a multi-deca-billion-dollar asset. It's like, how insane is this? So I just thought that like we're now like testing the like limits of governance. And then the final one for the week, Aripol, probably one of my favorite thinkers in crypto. And I kind of like agree with this take. We're at a point right now where we found some elements of product market fit throughout the crypto space in general, but a lot of them need maturity, and there's still a lot of problems in the model, as we've kind of discussed today. So I know I'm kind of like powering through this a bit, but let's get to the next bit. So
can I ask, how can we avoid whale dominancy in public votes?
Yeah, I think the idea is genuinely reputation. When you think about voters, there should be how aligned is this user to the network, and then how much capital they have. I think there's like a two-dimensional spectrum of like, I guess, user buy-in and capital. So if all the smaller whales are actually people who've been engaged with the community, been there since the start, then their say should be a lot higher than what it is, even though they don't have as much capital. So I think there's an element of reputation here fundamentally.
Okay. Cool.
Sweet. All good. So, current direction. There's kind of like three high-level things that we're going to cover today, and kind of ties into the direction of where we're going. So the first is we're defining our target persona for credit, and the way we think about this is going an inch wide and a mile deep. and the product that we're showing is catered around that particular persona. The second bit is fine-tuning our risk parameters so we can start launching to more people outside of the current scope we have for the credit product. And then the final bit is ensuring our infrastructure can handle the wave of users we anticipate coming in the next few months and years. And Alex, who is our whiz engineer when it comes to solving the really hard problems, will give us a rundown of that. So let's jump into it. I'll pass it on to Hugh to give us a rundown of what's going on in credit land.
Sweet, thanks, Kevin. So this is a shorter update on credit because I'm the only one representing the whole team, and there's a lot of work that's happening, but so I'll try to faithfully represent it as best as possible. So over the last 2 weeks, there's been 5 big pieces of work that we've been focusing on. Beta risk parameters, credit score quality assurance, the loan history metadata, liquidation engine, front-end redesign. On the risk side, the first and probably the most important thing that we're doing is we're getting ready for our public release of credit. So this requires us to set up and establish how we parameterize the vaults. So specifically, with our ETH vault, what is the range of LTV or capital efficiency that we'll offer, and a whole bunch of other things like credit limit and fee structure. And then on the credit score side, this is really related to how quickly a credit score will grow over time. And if you tuned in 2 weeks ago, we did talk about briefly how the credit score model works. But just a quick recap, the way that it essentially works is it fundamentally uses 2 rules. One is based on your borrower usage, and over time, if you maintain a safe but not too conservative but not too risky borrower usage, your credit score will progressively increase, and that correlates directly with your capital efficiency that you'll be able to realize on your vault. And the second one is related to how well you survived a situation in which many people got liquidated. So that's a pretty interesting take. But we basically just spent the last 2 weeks figuring out those final parameters for the beta. We've been using an internal version of that, which has been an accelerated version. Alongside that, there's a bit of work that we've been doing around quality assurance. And so this is really just looking at making sure that our data pipelines are feeding data and kind of feeding into the credit score as expected. We've basically put a whole bunch of spot checks, and Diego's working on fleshing that out further. Alongside the borrower user interface, we want to make sure that there's a strong relationship between actions that you take and feedback that you receive, so that that the thing's working as expected. So as part of that, Stuart's basically completed a data pipeline that will bring specific metadata to the front end, such as you've borrowed this amount, you've deposited this amount, you were liquidated for this amount. This is stuff that actually very few borrowing platforms do. There's this big problem that we found when we're doing customer research, which is that when you've been liquidated, you actually don't realize it, when you first log in what's going on. You actually think the protocol's been hacked. The last thing you expect is that you got liquidated. So what we're going to work on, and this is the first of many features along this same wavelength, is we want to work on basically creating the most I guess you would say the safest, but also just the most kind of information and friendly borrowing experience in DeFi, because we think that that's just something that doesn't exist very well in other platforms. So surfacing this type of information is going to be super, super powerful and impactful. Before we go live, the next thing here is the liquidation engine. This is obviously very important given what we experienced in the last 2 weeks with Ethereum and other assets in crypto. So we've completed that, and internal testing, let's just say it's been very thorough. Many of our people on the team got liquidated last week as a good way to test the liquidation engine. So that's been great. And then the final thing here is our front-end redesign. So we showcased this 2 weeks ago about what this will look like. So please have a look at the video recording for that. So Gabe and Kyle have basically started working on this, and it's looking excellent. I'm really, really excited for this, and we should be in a position in about 2 weeks to start demoing it to you guys. If you flick to the next slide, whoever's in control there, this is what we'll do. We'll basically be focusing on for the next 2 weeks on the engineering side. So firstly is that front end redesign. As I said, it's a complete redesign of the front end, but it's important because it addresses these massive user feedback points that we received in alpha, but it also aligns the design of the credit score with the user experience, and that's really important because, as we said, those 2 rules of how the credit score works will need to be kind of shown graphically and make intuitive sense to users when they start using the product. The second thing here is a research sprint on the credit report. So with our product, we basically have a whole bunch of complexity behind the scenes that we abstract away to something that's very intuitive for the user in terms of their credit score and how it works. But behind the scenes, there's a lot going on. So what we want to do is we want to surface a credit report, and we hope this will become the DeFi credit score. And how we're going to do that is we are going to surface this like very information data rich report, which will showcase exactly how the user has received their quoted score, and what data sources that's pulling from. The fact that we're going to be pulling a lot of data from third-party platforms like Aave, Maker, Compound, etc., will basically help us to become the reference credit score in DeFi, and that's like insanely powerful, and it's something that like doesn't exist yet. So we're really excited about this. This piece of work that we're doing over the next 2 weeks is just a research phase to just think about what data we want to present, how do we want to present it, and what it might look like. So this is something that Diego is going to be focusing on over the next week or so. Thirdly, there's a big piece of work on the user docs. So this is I think a couple of comments on general have asked this. This is super important. Obviously, there's a big change from what we presented in the docs previously. This work will contain information on the app itself, the risk, and also the infrastructure that supports ARCx. So hopefully, if you're a newcomer, you'll actually be able to read through those docs and get a really comprehensive understanding of the platform and how it all works, which we hope will be an important step to giving people kind of confidence before we get our audits sorted, I think, in October. And then finally, the last thing we're going to focus on here is the Vault BNC unlock parameters. And just to, if you haven't been following, essentially the way that we unlock capital efficiency is through through splitting a single collateral into several vaults. Each of them has a different maximum LTV depending on your credit score. And so what we want to do is we want to define how a user can unlock the more kind of capital efficient vaults over time. And yeah, this is important, obviously, because it's our core value proposition of capital efficiency, and it's the main mechanism for which somebody can kind of progress, and it's almost like gamified experience of getting to like the next stage. So maybe if you flick to the next slide, I just wanted to quickly just describe or call out something that we're early in the stages of planning, but it will be important in probably like 2 or 3 weeks, which is our beta testing program. So, we want to run a time-bound experiment where people who we are familiar with in the ARCx community will be able to start using the app, even though it's in a sort of beta stage. We want to do this. We did this internally for alpha, but the best thing we can do is share this app, get feedback in a low risk way, and then iterate on that product so that we can design the best thing for everyone that we want to focus on in terms of our customer segments. So the way that this will kind of work is that we will have our in terms of a rough timeline, engineers don't yell at me if this is wrong, but essentially we're looking at probably 2 to 3 weeks from now where we'll have this beta available for people who we've hand selected. These will be people who are very close to us, in terms of our investors, friends, that sort of thing. and some members of the community. But then in addition to that, we'll be opening up a wait list. So that wait list will be available to anyone to join. And as we feel more comfortable with our risk modeling and the app stability, etc., we will start opening that up to people from the community who can essentially come and join ARCx and see what it's like, and then give us feedback, hopefully. That will be a lot more information about this will be announced in the coming weeks. And yeah, we really look forward to it, because I think that's, it's rubber hitting the road kind of thing. And we're looking at just getting it out there and getting feedback, and then making the product really good. So yeah, that's it from me.
Bullish. Thank you for that update here. It's like the on-chain FICO score coming real. So super excited. So let's move to the next stage with Alex. That's going to show us how a lot of this amazing stuff is going to happen. So over to you.
GM. So I took those slides, by the way, from a very nice presentation that Cal gave us about this Merkle tree optimization we did. So basically, and I'm going to try to summarize it in a very top level fashion. I'm not going to dive too deep in the details here. So we had a problem at ARCx, like a scaling issue. So one thing we do here at ARCx, so we build scores, right? So scores based on blockchain interactions. So let's say you have a protocol that has a smart contract, 50,000 people interacted with the smart contract based on some criteria that we define. We take those 50K people, we build a score, and we can then come up with a level of an appreciation of how they interact with the smart contract. So that's one thing we do. One way to make sure that those scores are valid and public so that everyone can see them and validate them is we store them in Merkle trees. What are Merkle trees? Basically used everywhere in blockchain. It's a data structure that's used to validate the data that is contained inside of it. So if you take the top level, if you see here on the graph, top hash, which would be the root of a tree. So all the nodes below that root are data that are contained within the tree. And if I have a data, if I have a branch, a node of that tree, and I have the root, I can mathematically prove that this data is contained within the tree. So if we can move on to the next slide. Who's in charge of there you go, thank you. So yeah, basically for us, the main data source of our tree, so the base layer are the scores. And from the scores, we build trees that give us the Merkle root, the end thing from which we can verify the score's validity. The problem that we have is if we have a score, let's say 50,000, this score, it's kind of easy to process with the resources that we have right now. But let's say we have 1 million scores of X score, then it becomes quite, not complicated, just resource heavy. So it takes more time for us to process. And the idea behind the Merkle tree for us is that we want to have it published on the chain, right? So that anyone can call our smart contract with the root, and you can verify that your data is contained within that tree. So we need to run this thing pretty often, all the time, because our scores and our backend are updated pretty often. So we need to be in sync. If you go to the next slide, I think we can see some. Yeah. Oh, that's going too fast. I think you changed the order of the slides, but it's not a problem. Let's go to the next one, maybe. We had one with some numbers.
Oh, wait. This one. Which one his numbers?
Yeah, this one. This one is good. The current problem that we have. Go back to the current. There you go, this one. it's still a work in progress, right? We're like getting better at this. So yeah, current infra problem. So let's say we have 50k scores. It takes us about 2 to 5 minutes to process them with the current infrastructure that we have. But if we have scores, for example, like Shiba HODL, which we have, I think, 1 million of those. If you look, I mean, at the arrow, it's probably not so easy to see, but basically when we ran the score, the projected time it would take to process the whole thing was 26 hours, right? So this does not scale ultimately. So why did it take so long? I mean, it was basically because of the infrastructure. So you can see it as we had one machine, one server that was taking all the scores, processing them like in a sequential way, and just trying to do this whole thing like in one silo. So solution to the problem, if you go to the next, this one. So basically, without diving into too much technical details, so we just broke everything apart in like small chunks. So let's say for a given score, instead of like processing the whole 50,000 scores at once, we take those 50k scores and we just break them down in like, let's say, chunks of 5,000 scores each. And we do this for every score that we have. So let's say score X, score Y can both run like in parallel. So score X is broken down in a bunch of little chunks, while score Y is also broken down in a bunch of little chunks. And these guys are running in parallel, and we're creating at the end we're creating a Merkle tree for each scores. And then for every Merkle tree that we created from those scores, we then create like a master tree, a tree from all the trees of the scores. So it's quite massive because we process like a bunch of scores in the end. But ultimately, and if you go to the next slide, so we went from like processing scores that would take us like 26 hours to merely seconds, right? So if you look, 3K scores, 11 seconds, 100,000 scores, 31 seconds, and 1 million scores, about 1 minute, which is pretty acceptable. Are we going to get to a situation where we have like 500 million scores to process? Maybe one day, but we're not there yet. So like coming from 26 minutes to 26 hours, to 1 minute is quite an improvement. And you can go to the next slide. So this is where we are right now. So we made this whole like change in infrastructure, and it's pretty good. It's working for us. It's allowing us now to put all the scores that we have on chain, like without having to deal with any delay, like without being not synchronized with what we process in our backend and what is on chain actually right now. So it's pretty good. What I would say right now, this thing will scale for the upcoming future. We're in a pretty good position. The main problem that we could face at this moment is, as you see, Google Cloud Function. Because we use the cloud functions in the backend, those guys are like servers that we spin up to process the scores that we have. And the limitation that these guys have is a 9 minutes timeout. So if we try to run the whole process and we don't finish in 9 minutes, this thing just dies and kills the whole thing and we have to start again. So we're far from like having this problem at the moment because we can process 1 million scores in like 1 minute. So it's pretty good. So this is a thing that we took, I think, some weeks to work on. But I mean, it was done pretty nicely, like a nice team effort. And in the end, it's like super satisfying to see those numbers just come down, and we feel like very powerful right now with our infra. And we feel like we can just process, give us more and more scores. We're ready to like just mash them.
It'll take 1 week, they said.
Yeah.
Took a bit longer, but no, it's really cool stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Alex. I'll pass it over to Joel now for the community.
Yeah, so this will probably be quite a quick update. I'll go through the GM summary first. There's one notable change on the top GM active streaks, and that was me. I lost my streak, so I'll have to catch up with everyone else. Everyone else pretty much progressed with the scores, obviously, as you can see. And I'll move on to the next slide now.
Cool.
So the community highlight is Wu. I've been speaking to him in DMs. He's been giving great feedback on the dining table. I've just been picking his brains on stuff like he enjoys to watch, and any like feedback he has or improvements or things we might want to include or might not want to include. So yeah, thanks Wu. It's really great speaking to you. I'll probably reach out to a few more community members as well. So Corey, you're probably on my list as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it from me, unless anyone has anything to say.
No, well, we've got the final slide, words from the Pope, who can join us himself. So, Pope, over to you.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate the shout out. So today, 152. In a way, ARCx, with the product still in alpha throughout this whole ordeal, is the greatest gift the team could have given us. An untarnished, pristine platform, free from the sins of its forefathers. A gemstone, battered and beaten within the wrappers we call the markets, until smooth to the touch. I pray, on this day, we will see new all-time highs. We will climb the CoinGecko leaderboard. We will have that Ferrari, maybe a Maserati too. Amen. Thank you.
Oh man, that was beautiful.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Oh my god, this is the best dining table ever, hands down. Oh, well, I guess we'll call it here. Thank you to everyone tuning in live and thing. We're still probably going to hang around for another few minutes, so we'll cut this stream here, but whoever wants to hang on right now, feel free to.